Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Poultry Network podcast. My name's Tom Willings.
And my name's Tom Woolman.
Thomas, keeping well?
I am very well, very well. If you remember, actually, last week I told you that I'd won man of the match at the Southwest Chicken Association cricket match. I don't want to keep on banging on about it, but I've actually got my award here that I thought I could show you.
Yeah, please do. This doesn't work so well for those that are just listening, but if you're on video,
look at that.
Goodness me.
Look at it shine.
Yeah, I was going to say I can see it shine, but now I can't see. I'm blinded.
Well, it's the shine off of the trophy as opposed to the shine off of my forehead.
I'm still not absolutely clear what you did to earn it. You said you hit a few balls and you threw a few balls. You didn't sound like a cricketer to me.
No, well, I think I was just quite enthusiastic, and I did a lot of running around, and I think someone wanted to reward that enthusiasm.
Yeah.
So there were a number of other people that got awards as well. Actually, it wasn't just me, but
what 21 other people that got awards? Yeah,
just a few.
Anyway, I've had an exciting week. I've been to Groundswell. I've never been before. If you haven't been, so anyone who doesn't know what Groundswell is, it's a regenerative agriculture. I think you've got to call it a festival. Certainly, I've been to so few live music events in my life, so sheltered have I been, that when anyone in the future asks me, what acts have you seen live and what live music have you been to, is on the list. It's going on the list.
Do they have music there?
Andy Cato was there. Yeah, they do. Yeah. Some sort of big tents. So Groove Armada was as headline. It being on Mr. Cato of Clarkson's farm fame.
Yeah. What's it like? What's the vibe like? Because I think about other agricultural groupings, and I'm thinking about the sort of famous Oxford farming conferences. And you sort of have
the real farming conference.
The establishment and the intensive farms, and then you have the sort of the alternative lobby doing their own thing. And to me, I haven't been to Groundswell, but it almost looks like a meeting of these two worlds.
Yeah, I don't know how I would describe it through that kind of prism, that lens. I would say there's a lot of familiar faces. There's a lot of of businesses that we would know and we recognise from every other trade event that we go to. That said, poultry and regenerative farming are not immediately synonymous with one another. So I didn't see too many people from the egg or the meat sector, but the conversations and the presentations and the pitch are all about things that are very familiar messages to do with soil health, water health, pollution controls, etc. But from a regen point of view, I think this is a movement. That's downplaying it grossly, but an awakening of the value within soil and the urgency to manage soils differently, to sort of go back to the future, as it were, to stop with the enormous disturbance of soil and an over application of nutrient, and start to introduce diversity in what we're planting, and include animals as well as vegetation, as part of replication of nature, natural cycles. So there's a lot of good stuff.
There's almost this interesting is it tension? But I think what you quite often get is you get people from the organic sector saying, well, hey, look, this is exactly what we've been doing and we've been advocating for decades. But there is something different about regen in that farmers are doing their own thing and what's right for their farm and their soil. And whereas obviously to farm organically, you've got to comply with various ways of doing things, and there are rules about what you've got to do. In regen, it's much more about the right situation on the right farm, and there are people using chemicals, aren't they, to potentially to reduce soil movement and ploughing and all these other things. So it's a really fascinating space.
Yeah. I should also say that there's a guy, pretty famous chap called Chris Van Tullicum, who's written a very powerful book on ultra processed food. I think it's called Ultra Processed People. And if you haven't read it, go and read that book, Ultra Processed People.
He also did a very good a good Radio 4 series on chickens, actually.
Yeah, Fed.
A couple of years ago. Yes,
yeah,
that was it.
I think he's a fantastic broadcaster. So he pops up on BBC, but he's a scientist, obviously, in his own right, and a doctor, so as in medical practitioner as well. So spinning a lot of plates, doing a lot of stuff. I think he's become known on his UPF, ultra processed food, not crusade, but again presiding over the tensions between the scientific world and the commercial world that means that our diets are what they are and the health consequences for populations are what they are. This is turning into a very different podcast, but I would say if you're interested in Groundswell and you want to catch up with what went on this week, that would be the first thing that I would watch on catch up, as it were, and I'm pretty certain that you would find it online. His piece was absolutely fantastic. Shall we get on with the show?
Yes, because we're not here to talk regen farming, are we?
No.
I think we've got someone. We've got one of your friends and associates on the podcast this week.
Exactly. So part of my own diverse working life is working with a Dutch organisation called Kipster, who are egg producers, but with a very, very different twist, a different flavour. So think sort of radical transparency and open door policy to the general public, enabled by an awful lot of glass, an awful lot of light coming into their poultry shed, and they act as a real force for education and an openness about food production in the Netherlands, and they're challenging the way that our food industry, our poultry industry, works, particularly in respect of the sourcing of feed raw materials. So we're joined by Vera Bavinck, who is the vet for Kipster, but as we're going to hear about, she's doing a whole host of other different roles besides. So without further ado, let's welcome Vera.
Poultry Network Live is back and tickets are now on sale. Join the UK poultry sector at Harper Adams University on the 3rd of September for a full day of insight, discussion and high-value networking. This year's programme includes outlook sessions from leading poultry meat and egg businesses, health updates, including what to expect from avian influenza in the coming winter season, plus specialist technical panels covering broiler and egg business performance, bird performance and key production topics. There'll also be a special panel exploring how artificial intelligence is changing the agricultural landscape. Last year's event sold out, so book early to secure your place. Tickets are available now through the website at poultry.network, or you can email jake@dmediagroup.com. That's Poultry Network Live at Harper Adams University on September 3rd. Get your tickets now.
Vera, welcome to the podcast. Great to have you with us.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
Not at all. It's fantastic to actually get a perspective from beyond these shores. So Tom and I have had a host of different guests from meat and egg sectors, but I'm trying to think of anybody else that's joined us from further afield than Scotland, let's say. So
we now I'm reflecting, we've actually led quite a sheltered existence, haven't we, up to this point?
Yeah, this is the start of branching out, Tom, I think.
Across the North Sea.
Poultry Network going global, or at least a little bit European. Sounds good.
Yeah. So as we said, Vera, you've got multiple hats. Like myself, love a bit of variety. So we've got Kipster, and then we've got all of your other scientific work that you're involved with. Let's start with Kipster. I should declare at this point, I too work with Kipster. When I'm not recording podcasts with Tom, of course. And but for anyone who is not familiar with Kipster, let's between us do a little intro. Do you want to just describe the production system and what makes Kipster so different?
Sure. So Kipster is founded around 6 years ago, and the main philosophy is that you can produce protein of animal origin, in this in Kipster's case, it's eggs. It's all about the eggs. But you need to, do as minimal damage to the world as possible, which means that the CO2 footprint should be about 0. And to achieve that, you actually need to focus on animal feed. So Kipster, the house by design, is very environmental neutral, so full of solar panels and heat exchange, etc. It's very technical. But for me, as a poultry veterinarian, the feed is my focus. And so we are feeding mainly upcycled or residual feed sources, which means
streams.
some waste streams, correct?
Yeah.
And they can be from agricultural produce, so like soybean hulls. Actually, no, the soybean is another story again. The sunflower meal, it's basically meals all the time. And of course, we as a energy source, we use bakery products. So there is quite a lot of, I would say it's wheat-based, but it's already processed twice. So the first time it was actually meant for human consumption. It's turned down for whatever reason, and then we turn it into chicken feed. So, and that aspect is very challenging. And at the same time, we try to achieve the highest welfare you can actually give to the birds, which means that they, of course, in Holland, there is no layer beak treated. So Kipster birds are neither beak treated. And they live in full daylight. So half of the roof is actually full light penetrating. So it's very light in the Kipster house. I know in the UK there's discussion regarding daylight. That's the station which is already passed. We are already beyond that station in the Netherlands. So for us, it's not that much of a challenge. But also like the space, so the density of chickens is lower. We do a lot of welfare monitoring. There is actually a care unit for sick birds. So it's not just you put them away and either they survive or not, but you actually try to monitor them. And I can go on and on. About
one thing I'd
things
love you to talk about is the welfare accreditation scheme. So over here, pretty much the only animal welfare focused accreditation schemes. Of course, every accreditation scheme accounts for welfare, but that is singularly focused on animal welfare would be RSPCA assured, and they act as an independent assessment body to their independent code of practice, and they go and audit the farm. And but it's very much binary. You're either assured by, audited by, certified by RSPCA assured, or you're not. Whereas in the Netherlands, you've got a scheme called Better Leven. Could you just explain to people who haven't heard of Better Leven what it means and how it works and where Kipster sits in that framework? Because these are birds that don't have acres and acres of outdoor pasture.
Yes, correct.
But
so,
go on.
Yes, there is a big but. So Kipster is actually one of the exceptions. So the Better Leven, it's called a Better Life, I would say. It is a star system. You're 1, 2, or 3 stars. And it's kind of similar to the RSPCA background. So on an egg, you can see the number. It's 0 is organic, 1 is free range, 2 is aviary systems. And we actually provided our birds so much welfare that we thought we should be 3-star Beter Leven. But to be a 3-star, you need to be either free range or organic, in which case you need quite some outdoor access space. So it's 4 square meters per bird. And within the Kipster philosophy, there is this, I would say, goal to use arable land to produce crops for human food and not for animal feed, which is kind of in conflict with the 4 square meters per square hen. And at the same time, if you look at those outdoor ranges, most of them, the birds don't use the full range because it's quite scary for a bird to go over an open space. It's actually kind of a suicidal mission if you think about it, unless there's a huge amount of vegetation. So Kipster
does beg the question whether there should be a huge amount of vegetation. If the birds don't go outside, is that a problem with the bird or is that the problem with the outside? I might say that's a problem with the outside.
It is correct. It's a problem with the outside, but that's how practice looks like.
Yeah.
And with some exceptions, I have to be honest, there are some exceptions for sure. But the other thing is that we have avian influenza every year. We have this obligation to keep the birds indoor, and it's now around 5 months straight on. which means that if you are free range or organic, you will not use that space. So out of a bird's perspective, that's not a big win. And therefore, Kipster is designed completely it's animal focused. That's the design. So it has different functional spaces indoor, and in the center of the house, there's quite a large indoor garden, we call it, which is always accessible during daylight hours. And then they have a smaller area outside where they indeed can go outside, where there are some plants, but it's smaller compared to the needs you need for the 3-star commitment. So we actually went into discussion with the veterinarian, and they decided to indeed apply the 3-star label to Kipster.
Yeah,
So
and to
although
their
we don't
enormous credit, they've
Yes.
applied their latitude, their discretion, their insight, their science to say, okay, you don't meet the standard by the letter of our rules, but because of these features, because of these benefits,
Yes.
we'll apply the 3 stars. So congratulations.
I mean, that's very interesting, but I'm also thinking we're in the middle of a patch of quite warm weather and prolonged, hot weather in the UK. When you've got that amount of natural daylight coming in, how do you stop the Kipster house not just turning into a greenhouse when you get these hot days?
No, I think eggplants wouldn't mind growing indoor by us. So it is warm, but there is all like how do you call it? This evaporation cooling systems.
Yes, evaporative
So-
cooling.
Yeah. So and we can actually control the temperature up to a certain amount, because last weeks it was like nearly 40 degrees outside, and inside it was 34, which is warm. But having said so, we use white birds only. That's a credit if it's so warm. And they haven't really collapsed. So I was surprised. During the daytime, you see them hiding in the nighttime area. So they don't go into the inside indoor garden very much with the temperatures. And in the nighttime area, it's cooler again. So
The stocking density is very low, isn't it? When you take account of the indoor garden that you mentioned, which is in the central sort of atrium, Tom, of this house. When you take account of all of the space, I think the birds are stocked at somewhere between 6 and 6.5 birds per metre squared. So a little more than organic standards, much bigger house, but again, white birds and a low stocking density in bird per. I mean, there's an argument that with the white bird and its lower body weight, I've heard it said that should there be a higher stocking density allowed for that particular strain or those particular strains, because quite simply they're taking up only 80% of the space, for example.
And that's a distinction, isn't it? I think between laying and meat sectors, is that in laying your stocking rate is calculated, isn't it, in birds per metre
Yes.
squared, whereas in the meat sector
You're
it's
kilos,
kilos, isn't it?
Yeah, but the kilos change over time. In the meat sector and in
Exactly.
the laying, it's the same. But to be honest, I remember, let's say, quite a while back when I was working just as a poultry veterinarian in practice, that visiting organic farmers, which have a stocking density of 6 birds per square meter, had quite less challenges compared to the others, which have 9 birds per square meter. Now it changed a bit by the change of the feed restriction. So the organic feed supply has some issues with ingredients, which makes it a bit harder to feed the bird in a correct way. But I think having a stocking density of 6 per square meter, independent of the color of birds you use, it just releases this pressure on the system. It's easier to farm. So I probably, if I can recommend people, and sometimes, especially abroad, people sometimes ask, what do you recommend, especially in African countries? I never start with 9 birds per square meter. If you have the space, lower down. And also we have one Kipster house which has a bit lower capacity or lower stocking density due to rules and regulations, and it's easier again. So I do see definitely that there is some, we give ourselves some challenges by the stocking density being as high as we can to be as efficient as we can, which I understand economically, of course.
But I think that comes from, I mean, the UK and the Netherlands would probably be pretty similar, wouldn't we? We're a highly populated relatively small country and land is expensive, and that's why we've both developed systems where we try and be intensive, don't we? Whereas in other countries, as you say, the price of land is probably much lower and availability is much higher, and so yeah, you can set up a farm where you've got a lower stocking density quite happily and still make money.
Vera, you had started to touch on there some of the things that you're looking at beyond Kipster, because of course you're wearing, as I've already said, many hats. Talk to us about some of the other projects that you're involved with. I know you're looking at keel bones. You've mentioned Africa. Broaden our horizons for a moment.
Well, there's a division, I would say, between what I do in Netherlands or Europe and in African countries, which I just say Africa, and Africa is huge. So therefore, I just make plural countries. Yes, very diverse. But in the Netherlands, for instance, one of the things I do, I developed a monitoring tool to monitoring welfare of laying hens, which is called KipUp. And one of the aspects of this tool, and also one of the main motivations I started it, is that in laying hens you have quite a significant amount of keelbone fractures, which when I came from, I was a mixed practitioner. And for me, a fracture, that's for me, give me a fracture and I'll fix it. And then I came into the laying hens and there were huge fractures, and it was like a side effect or just, damage which you can't do anything about. And for me, it was like I could not put my hand around it. I thought, now I see differences between flocks. There must be a reason, and it must hurt. And by now, science has, definitely proven that it is painful, and it does, give the bird some times where they don't eat as much. So there is some laying or performance dip as well. But for me, the welfare aspect was actually my main motivation. And I started to measure it, and quite soon you end up with numbers like 70% of the birds, they develop a keelbone fracture.
Yeah.
And there is differences between fractures. You have the fracture midway and you have the fracture of the tip, the apex it's called. And the apex we actually know very little about, but it's also the most common one who fractures. And one of the theories is that birds, when they have the onset of lay, they're still growing. They're still quite young, so their skeleton has not yet fully calcified. And therefore you have this cartilage. Yeah, you have a cartilage tip, which is very, fragile. And they don't need to crash into a system or to fall down or anything dramatic. It's just enough to lay an egg or to pull your wings. You can already fracture that piece of bone.
So is it something that you tend to see with certain production systems? Is it aviary systems?
No, actually in cages, people always said, well, they did not have the fractures then, so let's turn back to cages for the welfare of the birds. Luckily, scientifically, they also use MRI, CT scans now, and they do see the fractures, but they just don't see the callus formation, which is this kind of natural repair mechanism, which you can palpate. And therefore, you can say it has been fractured, I can feel it. But if there is no callus formation, you can't feel it. You need more diagnostic tools. And recently, we had, of course, last year's avian influenza was a long avian influenza year, and a lot of restrictions concerning transportation of birds, and a lot of, I think if you were a breeder company, you had a ongoing nightmare for months because all the transportations were blocked and the pullets were staying somewhere, and houses could not be depopulated because every time an outbreak, 10-kilometer zone was in place, which means that for 30 days you could not move birds. And within Kipster, we had several flocks which needed to change over, which could not. So they had to wait a few weeks. So the pullets, which were supposed to come in, they had to wait as well. And so they were put on kind of a standstill. So you give them very minimal light. They don't eat much more than they did on the moment you start to put a standstill or you halt. And then you move them. And so we got flocks in at age 23 weeks.
Wow.
Which normally they would be quite full on into the production already. And now they had hardly any eggs. A few maybe, but not much. So when they arrived, the uniformity was shattered. It was like, I was just like afraid, this is never going to work. But we decided to slow down and not put them in full light straight away, but wait until they would show us that they were developing again. So we were not in a hurry. And those 3 flocks, they have started much later with the onset of lay. And within my kip-up, I monitor keel bone fractures at the age of 19 weeks, which wasn't in these flocks, it was a bit later, and then 35, 50, and at the end of the cycle. And my first measurements have been done already, and I have a significant lower amount of fractures, like a very significant. So I'm still, tempting my enthusiasm because I still need to do the 50 weeks fracture count. So maybe it's just delayed, who knows? But so far, I think in practice, I have a tool, and it's an expensive tool, mind you, but you need to want to do it. And if we, for instance, would consider to go for the late step down, right, in the pullet phase, so you with light intense, you can play around with the onset of lay quite a bit.
So do you think it's a behavioural change, or do you think it is because the rearing house environment has got less obstacles, or is it
No, I
simply
think we just give them
greater
time.
body weight, greater maturity, greater skeletal development, and greater
exactly.
Robustness really for the environment?
I think the last points are most important.
Yeah. So you would be, a hypothesis would be actually a later transfer. Is it a heavier weight at the point that we light the birds up, or is it simply just a longer period of time chronologically that's important?
Exactly, it's a longer period of time because weight-wise they would be not much ahead. So you really stop them a few weeks, but apparently bone development still continues.
And what are the production characteristics of these birds that have been delayed? I understand if the keel bones are better, and that makes sense. But are they?
Yeah.
Is the production slightly higher for having left them a little bit longer, or is it on track?
No, they don't peak on a higher level. But having said so, the peak of 95 or 96, let's say that's the average peak we see. You can have 98, right? Some good flocks, they hold up for 98% for quite a few weeks. We have them now and then as well. These flocks, particular flocks, have, well, yes, one has hit the 98, the other the 96. But I actually expect them to be more persistent. That would be my hypothesis, which is too early to let you know. But I do know other flocks which have been also started later, which are not the Kipster ones. One of them didn't really reach much more than 92. So they really had an issue starting. So it's not only a positive song I'm singing. I want to be realistic as well. So it does give challenges. I think by holding them back, you do a physiological stressful thing because you really give them 4 hours daylight, which is not a very natural thing to do. It's an emergency handbrake, let's say. So, and you must also be there kind of interfering with a natural development. So I wasn't surprised that some flocks actually have a very poor start. But to know what the persistence will be, we are 1 year too early to talk.
Okay, well, we'll need to get you back. So if that's the front end of the life cycle, you're busy on end of lay, end of life, and slaughter. I know it's a dark topic. In this country, we have very few abattoirs that are accredited to handle end of lay hens. And they're actually all relatively central in the country. So we've got some hens that are, in the far north, the far south of the country, travelling for quite some way in order to reach an approved abattoir. But you're looking at mobile on-farm solutions. Just talk to us a bit about that, Vera.
Yeah, that idea is actually started because I also kind of gathered a small-scale poultry network, which is already now about 100 poultry farmers, which have only 249 birds. And that's with a reason, because you are considered a hobby. So you have not all those rules and regulations you need to comply with if you are a large-scale farmer. So these farmers are often dairy farmer or agricultural farmer, and some of them really use chickens in their production cycle, in the sense that they are used to remove snail eggs from the field or weeds or whatever. Being so small, there is nowhere in the Netherlands, except one location, you can go to for slaughter. So these people are always facing a difficult moment at the end of the cycle, because where do you go to? Because large slaughterhouse, we have the same situation, although we are a postal stamp as a country. So the transportation time will never reach much more than 3 hours if you slaughter within the Netherlands. but small-scale farmers had nowhere to go to. So I worked together with this group and we decided, and actually the government asked us, because I complained on and on and on, like, what should I do? What should I do? And they say, okay, you find out what are the restrictions. So together with a colleague, we dived into all the rules and regulations, which is quite tough literature. And we wrote a report which stated, yes, officially it's possible, but it's like you come into you like horses, you're from the UK. So you have a jumping competition and there is this whole, the parkour. And then you come in on a Shetland pony and you say, hey, can someone lower those, obstacles? And they say, no, you better train. It's impossible. So, and that's how our system is only built for big horses. And therefore, if you are a small-scale farmer, which the government loves, they are all like inclusive biodiversity, welfare, small distance between consumer and farmer, it ticks all the boxes. But then the whole layout of the network, how do you actually should practically, where do you buy them, how you vaccinate them, where do you slaughter them, those 3 steps are nearly impossible to comply.
Yeah.
So we started a project and then there is a follow-up. So this year we will actually have 2 different mobile slaughtering units, which we will use to slaughter at least 12 flocks with the whole government and all the rules and regulations.
Is this equipment, sorry to interrupt you, Vera, but is this equipment also limited in scale to this 249 bird limit that you mentioned, or has it got the capacity to do more?
Well, it's small. It's 600 a day, and there's one which is designed for rabbits, which is just over 1,000. So a day. So it's very small compared to the large slaughtering houses. But I think that if this is going to be a success, so we prove that it's food safety, animal welfare is all guaranteed, then there should be some support also from the government to think bigger, to think outside the box. And because, for instance, Kipster is already mentioning mobile slaughtering, a wish to do a mobile slaughtering so that the birds don't need to go on transportation for a long time. Yeah, and it's possible, but it's complex.
Could you see a time where the technology is deployed on a farm as large as a Kipster farm? So for anyone who doesn't know, a Kipster house would still have 20,000 birds or so. So it's very much a commercial size unit. Could you see this technology scaled up to such a degree that it could be used on a commercial farm?
Yes, I could actually. There's already drawings for it, to be honest.
Yeah.
So yeah, the drawings are there. It's about money, basically.
Yeah. Because although your 249 bird limit may not be, let's say relevant to the people that are likely to be listening to this, there will also be a lot of people that can relate to being too small for the abattoirs in this country to serve, or too far away for them to serve. I can think of organic mobile houses with 2,000 or 3,000 birds, when an articulated lorry is capable of carrying, in the region of 8,000 birds, and simply they face a very difficult time at making those same arrangements. Not quite the scale that you're talking, but still, the fences for them. Let's go back to show jumping. The fences are still a bit high for them. So and yes. Transport is absolutely something that we're all aware of, particularly as we're suffering with the heat waves that we have in recent weeks. Whether it's lower stocking or it's simply limitations on the ability to travel in the heat of the day. These things are issues that we are going to face more and more if the effects of global warming continue to bite.
But especially what you mentioned, those smaller, in between farmers, I would call them. Let's say 10,000 birds. I can imagine that if you have a mobile slaughtering unit at your doorstep, you take 2 days and the job is done. So for instance, Kipster, it's 24,000 birds, but we always depopulate in 2 days. And that's not because we think 24,000 is too much to handle, but it's because we actually pick them up upright. So every bird is picked up individually or 2 at a time, and not like regular catching on the legs. And that's just one part of this welfare claim that we say, well, we will be as respectful welfare-wise as we can until the end. And we found out soon that if you have 24,000, it's not that it's not possible, but people get tired. They have work the next day as well. And you keep up the spirit for the workers much more if you say, okay, let's do 12,000 as a maximum one evening and the other half tomorrow.
I should say we've barely touched the surface in terms of all of the other points of difference around Kipster, but just returning for a moment to the actual process of this on-farm slaughter. Are the birds going into the human food chain as a
Yeah.
and in result they are. So you know,
Sure.
the hygiene is of suitable standard that
Yeah.
allows human
It
consumption.
complies completely with the European rules and regulation regarding slaughterhouse facility.
Yeah.
So it's very well to clean. It's easy to clean. I mean, it's all like a slaughterhouse. Yeah.
I remember when I was over in New Zealand milking cows when I was a young boy before I grew this moustache. And I remember on the dairy farm I was at, he had a guy that came over to do mobile slaughtering on farm. And from a welfare point of view, it was brilliant. Literally, you know, just walked the cow in to the yard and did the deed there and then. Yeah, and it's quite. It just blew my mind coming from the UK, where you think you know you'd never be allowed to do this, but how great for the animal and much lower cost as well to everyone involved. So, if we could replicate something like that with poultry, I think that would be fantastic.
Mm. We should wrap up. Firstly, with the thought that Tom was born without a moustache.
Oh.
Yeah, I can't. That blows my mind. I can't believe that that's possible. But Vera, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for sharing a little bit of the things that you're working on. I think there is so much that you're involved with that we should definitely ask you back in the months ahead to update on the various projects. But yeah, for now,
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Well, good. Nice to see you.
Well, thank you for lining that up, Tom. That was brilliant. I thought
I told you she'd be
Vera was
brilliant.
fascinating.
She's absolutely spot on. She's very, very good, and I hope everyone enjoyed listening to Vera. She's got a passion and an enthusiasm for all of her work that I think is absolutely infectious. So we could have gone on for hours. We sort of said as we stopped recording we should have a series with Vera, because you know we barely touched on her work in Africa, and there's a lot more to learn about Kipster and the on-farm slaughter piece is also one to watch.
Mm-hmm. One thing that I was very interested in, but again we could have talked a little bit more about, was about the use of byproducts in animal feed, which I know is something that the pig sector has been doing for many, many years. But I know that the success of that sector very much depends on where you are in the country. Can you actually access the feed? And of course, pigs are brilliant because they can utilise all sorts of different things.
In a form, yeah.
So whereas poultry have tended to be a little bit more, a little bit less tolerant of eating all sorts of things. So I wonder how much of a limiting factor that is in the UK, and how easy it is to set up that sort of scheme in, well, not necessarily in the UK, but in all sorts of other countries. Is this something that could be happening all over the place, or is this very much a niche that is going to be restricted to certain localities?
My take in it would be, and that's kind of the role that I am working on in Kipster, but my take would be doing something first is always going to be much, much harder than following on behind. So understandably, there is a blueprint for the way that we produce feed and the origins of the raw materials that we use. Not to say that nutritionally what we've optimized isn't, absolutely right for the bird and part of the development of the bird. So we're swimming against the tide in that respect. But as far as setting up the physical supply chains, the waste streams are there. The same, bakery items and pastas and pancakes and sweets and things that Kipster are using exist in this country. The same organizations that transport those things and turn them into whatever they are currently turned into exist. These are enormous multinational companies. I think there is an interest and a will even in the food, animal feed manufacturing, compound feed manufacturing industry to explore this. There is a very strong sustainability message about the circularity of farming. I think the message that I really, really buy into with Kipster is about reducing the conflict for limited land resources between crops grown to feed animals for them to convert it into protein versus crops grown for direct human consumption. And the Kipster vision is that land that is not suitable for arable crop production for our consumption should be used with four-legged species grazing for meat, but the land that is growing cereals or pulses or what have you for animal feed really ought to be only used for food that we're going to consume directly. And I think that's got I think that's got legs, that's got resonance. It's going to take time. It's going to take an awful lot of effort to refine the right products in the right inclusion. There's the physical piece about the actual manufacturing process, because right now one of the limiting factors, of course, in any mill is how many bins or how many silos have we got, how much storage have we got for how many different segregated raw materials. And so if we want to do something differently, there's an enormous investment barrier that's got to be overcome. So I think to the long story short is it's hard work, but it is not impossible, and therefore if there is a will, then we will find a way.
Brilliant.
Good. Well, an enjoyable episode. Once again, I feel that any episode is not complete with reference to your moustache, and we've got that in there. So next time, let's not talk about the cricket. But we'll see.
No, that's all right. I'll hold off for a few more weeks before referencing the cricket again. But you're talking about the actual cricket, aren't you?
Yeah. What cricket were you talking about?
Well, I thought you might be talking about the England team, but
have you had a call
anyway.
up? You mentioned that you were an all-rounder. Have you had that? Have you had the call?
No, I haven't. No.
Yeah,
no.
I wonder if by the time this goes out, we'll have a new captain, T.H. Woolman.
You're very flattering, Tom. Thank you very much. But
See you next week, Tom.
See you next week.
Bye, everybody.